Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor at the University of North Carolina in the Department of Mass Communication. Our guest today is Kevin Freeman, president of Action Lab Entertainment. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, what is Action Lab?
Action Lab is a small press comic book publisher. We were founded in 2010. It was started by 5 guys. I wasn't one of them, as a matter of fact, who weren't real satisfied with a lot of the things that were being published at the time, and they decided to pool their resources and try themselves to put out a quality product that would be a nice alternative to some of the big publishers.
Now, do you print comics or is it digital delivery?
Both. We do both. Okay. We print and our books are available through Diamond Distribution, which is the predominant distributor, of course, for comics, and it's also which makes it available in comic retail stores. And we also have our comics available digitally on Comixology and Comics Plus and a couple of other digital sources as well.
Well, I guess the big question is, how do you become president of Action Lab if you're not one of the founders of the company?
Yeah, it's sort of a weird story, and I'll try to keep it relatively brief. Back when I was in graduate school, I worked at a comic book store part-time, and a friend of mine who owned the store, a few years later, he started his own publisher called Ape Entertainment. I don't know if you were familiar with them or not. But they were looking for some help doing some editing, and he and I crossed paths quite a bit at comic book shows, and he asked me if I might be willing to give him a hand. I did, and I agreed, and I edited a few titles, and then I slowly moved up the chain there. I ended up being the managing editor. I was there for almost almost 7 years. Then I decided to take a step back and move on to some other things, and literally a week after I stepped down, the guys at Action Lab asked if I would come and help them out. I agreed. I did some editing for them, and then before I knew it, they decided to make me the president, and the rest is history.
So it's you and Stan Lee, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what does a president do?
It's not as glamorous as one might think. I do a lot of the direct communications with Diamond to make sure that our books get to them on time so that they can be published in the catalog so that stores can order them. I do a lot of fixing problems here and there. I also contact the creative teams to make sure that they're on schedule so that their books will get released when we want them to get released. And then I do a lot of troubleshooting and kind of the face of the company. So a demagogue, if you will. I do a lot of I make a lot of official statements in press releases. I do panels at conventions. I'm kind of the face of the company, public faces as far as that's concerned as well.
Mm-hmm. Now you talked about getting books out on time, and this is something that when Image first started, I believe there were the 7 big creators that founded Image. It was very difficult for them to get their books out on time because they were all perfectionists. And if you talk to Kevin Maguire of Justice League fame, he talks about how he can't hit that monthly deadline. So how far out do you get your books in before you solicit them?
5 months ahead is usually the standard. The Diamond sends us a date that the solicitations are due. And then once we give them the material that they need, it's another 2 months before the catalog actually comes out, and then it's 2 months after the catalog comes out before books actually hit the shelves. So we have a policy at Action Lab that essentially any project that you're working on with us has to be in the can, has to be finished before we will solicit it. And what that means is that once it's done, that the books will actually not be late. So we've been pretty good about that. And if in fact creators happen to be late on a project, nobody knows except me and the creators because we haven't solicited it yet. So it keeps it secret pretty well.
Right. That's, I think, a model that a lot of publishers should follow. I do recall, I think I'm still waiting on George Perez's 2nd issue of Crimson Plague.
Crimson Plague. Yeah, it's a little harder when you have a monthly book because you're always on that deadline. But when you do it in like 4-issue miniseries or 6-issue miniseries, it's a lot easier to do because the project is complete.
And that's basically what Action Lab focuses on is...
Right, it's hard to do an ongoing title when you're a small press publisher because you never know what the numbers are going to be, and of course you want that book to be profitable and preferably profitable in the long term, and so you want to wait and see how the book initially does, and then if you're comfortable with the numbers then you can move on. We actually launched, we had a book called Skyward that started off as a 4-issue miniseries, but the sales have been really good, and we decided to continue it as an ongoing, and we're soliciting issue 10 in a couple of weeks. So that's been our first one. It's been very successful so far.
And do the majority of your sales come from individual issues, or are you collecting them in trades?
We
like
do
the big
both.
publishers?
I would say predominantly the sales come from individual issues, but we do offer trade paperback versions of virtually everything that we do. And the logic is kind of that the money that you make from the individual issues, or the floppies as we like to call it in the industry, will pay for the trade, and that's usually how it works. The trade has a longer shelf life, of course, too, so that's nice.
Now, with DC and Marvel, they own the characters and they hire writers and artists to put the books together. Is the dynamic different for Action Lab?
It is. We kind of follow more of the Image idea where everything is creator-owned. So any projects that are brought to us, that are pitched to us by creators, are owned by them. And in our contract, we make a deal where essentially the profits are split. They get to keep a majority of the profits, but we keep some because we do distribution, we do advertising, we do marketing, a lot of that other stuff that, frankly, they as creators really don't have time to do. They need to be working on their books, so we handle a lot of that stuff for them. But property and everything, I mean, it is their property.
And I think that's great, because when you read the stories of Jack Kirby, who's credited with creating most of the characters in the Marvel Universe along with Stan Lee, but the visuals that most people remember, the iconic uniforms of the Fantastic Four or Captain America, he has no, or his family has no ownership of those characters. So I think it's great that we have more creator publishers that are creator-owned projects that publishers are able to get out there.
And he's lost many lawsuits, unfortunately,
Yes.
in trying to get some revenue from those creations.
It's sad how these things progress, but as we move on, what books of yours are the ones that people are talking about the most?
Well, probably our best known book is one of our first titles that we launched in 2011. It's called Princeless, written by Jeremy Whitley. It is a book that kind of turns the classic fairy tale on its ear, in that it's a girl, a princess, who is locked up by her evil parents in a tower, and waiting for a prince to rescue her, of course. But she gets tired of waiting. She decides to take matters into her own hands. She rescues herself. She befriends the dragon that is guarding her lair, and then her and the dragon try to rescue her other sisters who are locked in other towers around the kingdom. She's also a character, a person of color, and which is appealing to a lot of folks. And we were really happy because that book got 2 Eisner nominations and really put us on the map, and has paved the way for things to come. I mentioned Skyward already as well. It's done by Jeremy Dale, who is a creator that maybe you've heard of. He's done a lot of stuff for Image. He did G.I. Joe. And his Skyward book is doing very well. We also have really excited about Molly Danger, which is done by Jamal Igle. He did Supergirl for a long time with DC, and we launched that book in a 9x12 kind of European style hardcover graphic novel, and that's been received really well as well. And we've got our fingers crossed that might get nominated for some awards this year when the time comes. You
mentioned the Eisner Award. Now, the Eisner Award is basically the Academy Award of comics.
Right.
Who are you up against when you were nominated, or when your books were nominated?
Well, the book Princeless got 2 nominations. The first nomination was Best Single Issue, and the second nomination was the Best Issue for Young Readers, I believe. And we lost the Best Single Issue Eisner to Daredevil, which is written by Mark Waid, and everybody. I mean, Mark Waid's a big name in the industry, of course, and Daredevil's a big popular character. So there was no shame in that. And really just getting nominated our very first year of publication really put a feather in our cap, and it's definitely helped us get a lot of name recognition. There's still a long way to go, but we're really pleased with the sales growth that we've seen over the last couple of years, and we hope it keeps going.
Now, you've also written a series, and I'm sorry, I can never remember the name of it because my brain is Swiss cheese. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I've written quite a few things, actually. When I was at Ape Entertainment, I took charge of a couple of, I wrote some stories in a few of the creator-owned projects that they had. I wrote some stories for Shrek. I wrote a Richie Rich story. But sort of my magnum opus has been a book called Subculture that I did. I published it originally as a 4-issue miniseries through Ape Entertainment. Then after that miniseries quit, the artist and I decided that we wanted to continue it as a webcomic. We did it for about 4.5 years. We did 500 web strips. And recently we collected that book into an omnibus that Action Lab published. And another thing that I did for Action Lab is that we had the license to do a book called NFL Rush Zone. It's a cartoon based on, or it's a comic that's based on a Nicktoons cartoon that's licensed by the NFL. and I wrote the kind of introductory trade paperback to that story, and it launched at the Super Bowl, so that was pretty exciting. I mean, thousands of kids at the Super Bowl all getting that book. It was really neat.
That is interesting that that the NFL is coming to Action Lab to put these books together.
We were shocked just as much as you are. I mean, surely there were bigger companies that were pitching them as well, but they liked our model, and they liked how what we presented to them, and yeah, it worked great.
So let's talk about subculture for a
Sure.
moment. Now, you said you did 4 issues that were collected as comics. I'm imagining where it's, what, 22 or so pages
Yeah,
each?
it was 96 pages altogether.
And when you go to a digital-only delivery, are you doing like newspaper-style strips where it's 3 or 4
three
panels?
or 4 panels, usually single gag. We kind of turn it into a gag a day sort of thing, although we only did it twice a week. And being a comic book geek that I am, and being an academic also, I mean, I'm very observant when it comes to going to conventions and doing, you know, when you immerse yourself in geek culture, there's a lot of things that that we do that are a little strange or that stick out. We have interesting activities and interesting behaviors, and I kind of poke fun at geek culture. Whether it's Star Wars or comic books or Star Trek or gamers or role players or manga fans or any of that stuff, but at the same time, sort of the moniker of the story is to admit it, that you're one of them. Don't be ashamed. That
Right.
you know, don't be afraid of who you are. Express yourself, and so if you can laugh at yourself a little bit, you'll get a kick out of it.
Well, what I think we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at some highlights from the North Carolina Comicon, where we did meet Kevin. But I also spoke with Gail Simone, Kevin Maguire, Dan Jurgens, and Dan Parent from Archie Comics. The first clip we're going to take a look at is Dan Jurgens answering the question how he approached the character of Superman, actually how he approached him as Clark Kent, rather than Superman being Superman and Clark Kent being the alter ego, having Clark Kent being the person and Superman being the character.
Well, you know, to go along right with what you said, that yeah, Clark Kent was Superman, and if you look at it and start to consider, here's a kid who was raised throughout his childhood years, and the Superman I worked on at that point, there was no Superboy, remember, so his powers did not start to manifest themselves until later. It really was, here's a kid who grew up on a farm in Kansas, and that is the core of who obviously Clark is, and therefore the core of who Superman is, and that's what I tried to convey.
When you created Booster Gold, I think you were at DC just a few years at that point. So how do you convince a major comic book publisher to give you a series of your own?
Well, if you look back at the time when I created Booster, so we're talking 1984 and 1985 at DC, it was a very creative time there, and there were a lot of different things happening in terms of them wanting to try new things. So one of the things I did is I just had this thought in mind for a different type of hero. You know, they were already starting to do the Blue Devil stuff. It was clear they wanted to experiment with different directions and everything. And I had breakfast with Dick Giordano one day, and I said, this is what I want to do. Here's this general hero. Here's his goofy name, Booster Gold, but here's what he's about. And it is about someone who wants to do the right thing, but doesn't mind getting the glory in the process. So he's into it in terms of the media stuff. He's into it in terms of the celebrity aspect of things and all that. And yeah, he wants to do the right thing, but he's kind of awkward in the way he does it, might screw a couple of things up. And so I described the whole thing to Dick, and he just said, let's do it. And it was that simple. I mean, Dick said, we'll do this, before I even wrote anything down. And it really was, I typed up a paragraph on a sheet, and it was a go from there. Total green light. It was a great way to work.
Now, I guess things have changed. It's been about 30 years since Booster's been created. I'm assuming now it's a little bit more difficult when you're dealing with a company like DC because they're part of the Warner Communication family, and you know the characters are assets rather than the playground for creators such as yourself. So have you seen a shift? If you wanted to propose a series to DC, would they be agreeable to something in that way, or would you have to go through more hoops?
Oh, I think now it's a bigger company, and in a bigger company there are more layers. So if I think back to DC at that time, again, we're talking a long time ago now, it's almost 30 years, it was just a smaller, simpler type of operation. Yes, now, you know, if you all of a sudden lay the right idea on the right person at the right time, you can get a lot done in a short amount of time, but it is still a tougher thing, I think, not tougher, but a longer process to go through because, yeah, more people have to authorize it and sign off on it.
We're speaking with Kevin Maguire, the artist of Justice League International. We wanted to talk to you, Kevin. When you are doing your artwork, you're known for your facial expressions, your ability to tell a story without a word and have everyone understand what the characters are feeling. How do you approach that?
Well, first and foremost, like since I've been in high school, I've been involved in acting, improv, comedy, that kind of thing. So for me, it's always about what is the character going through, how are they feeling, and how is that expressed physically? When I'm doing improv on stage, I'm doing that just without thinking. But when you're sitting there drawing it, it's like you just find all the little subtleties that just not, having an eyebrow go up just a slight bit on one side changes what you believe the person is thinking, and that's like pretty valuable storytelling tool because it adds all kinds of subtlety and shading. And did that make any sense?
Absolutely made sense. I deal a lot with actors as well, being on the other side of the camera, so I do know what you're saying on that. Now, your iconic characters are your approach to Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. When you were drawing those two characters together, how did you convey that, I guess, buddy feeling?
I just came naturally, I guess. It wasn't anything I was thinking of conveying that way. It's just like they were buddies, and I've had buddies, and I kind of know how that works. It does amaze me, though. It really does amaze me that they're like how those two characters have become sort of not a symbol of buddies, but I see 13-year-old girls dressed up as Blue Beetle and Booster Gold. They weren't even born when that book was being done, and it amazes me. I don't know what to attribute that to, but it's great.
I guess the other question is a monthly deadline. How do you approach, I guess, 20 some odd pages a month? In your case,
wrong guy about that. Talking to the wrong guy about monthly deadlines. I'm not a monthly deadline guy.
Looking at your work, I would see it would be kind of tough because I see you're doing a sketch here of Blue Beetle, and it seems like you're putting a lot more effort into it than just a quick sketch.
This is I haven't even done the coloring yet. I mean, this is just layer one. So yeah, I'm a perfectionist with raging ADD. So like things like this drive me nuts. Because it's all these little details, and I just get like really bored, like, oh, something's on TV, and I just get easily distracted. But it has to be perfect. So that makes it difficult for me to keep to a monthly schedule, unfortunately. But what are you gonna do?
And the artwork that you do, I had read a few years back that you were switching over to all digital, but I see that most of this seems to be pen and ink work.
A lot of these are old. But yes, I did a few issues on digital, but the thing is it wasn't really speeding me up as I had hoped it would. There are things that I definitely prefer doing it in the computer, but there's also the market of selling original art, and going completely digital means you just completely get rid of that. That's no longer there. If it had sped me up more, then I would just stay on the computer, but it hasn't, so I'm not.
Joining me now, Gail Simone, the writer of many comic books, one of my personal favorites, Secret Six. Gail, how did you pitch that to DC, and how did they like that?
It was kind of funny because myself, along with a lot of other comic creators, had pitches in that were, villains books. We were huge fans of John Ostrander's Suicide Squad, so everyone wanted to do a villain book. It just so happened that when they were doing this big event, they wanted to do a villain book as part of the event, so they came to me and asked me if I was interested in doing a book called Villains United. And I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? This is going to be awesome. Yes, I'm interested. And so then I started asking if I could use the Joker. No. What about the Penguin? No. And I went through all this list of villains that I kind of wanted to use that I thought would be amazing. And none of them were available. They were all being used elsewhere. And so I started thinking, okay, how are we going to make this villains book with no villains? And so I just came up with this idea to reinvent some older characters, reimagine the characters like Catman, and put together this really strange team of characters that really were not that great at people, that might accidentally do something good sometimes, that wasn't their goal necessarily. And so we just had a lot of fun with that. And then out of Villains United came the Secret Six miniseries, and then out of that came ongoing that lasted 3 years. So it's just really fun to work with the psychology of this group and you know, their morals and stuff. And in the end, I think that the groups were better friends than like the Justice League and stuff, even though they're all selfish bastards and out for themselves.
So with the new 52, I know you've got Suicide Squad now, but is there talk of maybe perhaps bringing back the Secret Six?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, that stinks. Yeah. How does it make you feel going to these cons and seeing, like, you had a very seminal run on Wonder Woman, and seeing some of the people cosplaying your versions of the character?
It's amazing. Cosplayers are amazing, and we had the greatest misfit from Birds of Prey run, and we had, you know, lots of Black Canaries and things, and Bane and different characters that I've written throughout the years, and it's so fun. It's so fun to see people that enjoy and like these characters so much that they're willing to dress up and spend the time making costumes and be uncomfortable all day walking around in them and seeing how much they love them. It's incredible. It really livens up the conventions, and I love it.
Growing up, you saw a lot. The comic book industry was really run by males. Breaking into the comic book industry, and especially making a lot of your comics have very strong female leads or very strong female characters. How are you able to get by with that in that world, and how do you like the psychology behind that?
Here's the deal. It doesn't really enter my brain that I'm a female in this industry until other people remind me. And it's not to say, I mean, I know I'm female, I'm perfectly aware of that, but I don't look at myself as a writer in those terms. And, you know, I've always done things that were a little bit out of the ordinary regardless. And so being in an industry that, you know, had a lot of male creator to female creator, you know, not a great ratio, let's say. It just didn't enter into it. It was like, I just wanted to write the best story that I could possibly write, get enough sales that I could, you know, stick around for a while. And those are the kinds of things I was concerned with. But I did want to prove that we could have some strong female characters that were valuable to the companies, valuable as characters that had different personalities from each other, and that weren't always stories about gossip and backstabbing and putting on makeup and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with those type of stories, but I really wanted to tell more of a group of girls that could get along and get in and go on missions and get things done of their own volition. And same with Wonder Woman, very proactive character. She's not a character that had to have her adventures thrust upon her. She'd go out and seek them. And that's the type of stuff I like to write, and what I'm concerned about, not whether I'm one of a certain amount of female writers in an industry. It's not something that I worry about every day.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're talking with Dan Parent, one of the artists at Archie Comics. Dan, one of the books that you work on is Kevin Keller. Can you tell us a little bit about the character?
Yeah, well, Kevin, I created Kevin in 2010, and Kevin is the first openly gay character at Archie Comics. So, he appeared in an issue of Veronica 202. And really ever since then, the character just took off. It was very popular and has graduated to his own series, his own ongoing series, and is now part of the Archie universe.
And speaking of the Archie universe, why do you believe Archie Comics are willing to take on subjects that other comic publishers aren't willing to touch?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the new management that's there. We've got a new CEO, John Goldwater, and he really likes to keep Archie relevant. So he's all for trying new things. He's very creativity is the key. He likes us all to be very creative, and if it's a good idea, he lets us do it. As with Kevin Keller, as with new storylines that show a lot more diversity, where interracial relationships, things that Archie didn't do before. John is very pro trying new things.
Would you say, I've read a lot about editors at certain companies making it difficult for creators to create because there's always a mandate that the character must do this or must do that. You're saying it's different at Archie, so you kind of have free reign with the character within reason?
Well, within reason, of course, because we're still restrained by the fact that it's like a family sort of or all ages comic. But aside from that, they're very they want us to try new things. They want us to do different things that will just make the town of Riverdale more interesting. That you do that by adding new characters, diverse characters.
And I guess my most important question is, what was it like working with George Takei on that issue of Kevin Keller?
George Takei is, if you can believe it, he's nicer than he appears to be, and he appears to be like the nicest guy in the world, and he is extremely nice, very gracious. He's he was an Archie fan growing up too, which helps. And when he was so on board when he heard about Kevin, and was so glad to work with us, and we were thrilled to work with him, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again.
Welcome back to Comic Culture. I'm joined by two cosplayers, Laurel and Laura. What goes into making costumes as intricate as these?
Oh, wow. A lot of time. Warbler, paint. We probably spent half the summer in and out, making them, yeah.
Absolutely, and definitely a lot of friendship, because you get to a certain extent where they're just, when you're doing, boob armor or, your dominant hand armor, you need a lot of good friends who are willing to say, we will help you out with that. Absolutely. Basic knowledge of circuitry, research skills.
And it's a little bit, you guys are choosing two kind of obscure characters. What goes into choosing who you would like to cosplay?
I was a fan of the comic, and I was like, oh, I love it. These gals are kick-ass, and, we definitely want to be them. So she got on board, which is great.
Absolutely. Getting that whole notion of friendship, when you have a friend who can introduce you to some awesome comics, and you're like, you know what? I love the idea. Let's do it. I'm game.
So about how many hours do you think goes into putting together a costume like this?
With fixes and patches and, everything, probably 20, 30 at least. No, we spent...
Even on top of that,
because
we spent about 20, 30 days.
Yeah, so...
I think it really depends to a certain extent. I think that I'm tempted to say you could easily do 100 hours plus, and some of that really is just trial and error, and even just basic research. But it's fun though still. So it's work, but it's not. It's work that you can enjoy. So it doesn't really feel like it's that much time.
Right.
Except when you mess up, then you're just like, what have I done?
So when you're getting a comic convention in the Raleigh, Durham area. What does it mean that do you guys go to other cons, or is this your first con?
We go to other cons as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
absolutely,
cool.
Absolutely.
So it's a big deal to have one locally, and you don't have to travel hundreds of miles.
Nice. So much nicer. You don't have to carry a big suitcase and check it because, you don't want your stuff to get squished. And it's so much easier being able to drive here.
Well, and even in terms of the things that you can cosplay as, I'm already planning for next year, and I know, okay, there's certain things I can and can't take on a plane, but if I can drive, okay, I can go big or go home at that point.
Cool. Thank you guys so much.